Transform all your company's milestones, big or small, into impact with Impact Hero. Whether it's a sale, a new hire, a demo booked, or anything else, with Impact Hero, you automatically generate a gift that matters, like a tree planted, a kilo of plastic recovered, or a piece of coral reef restored. Join the hundreds of companies that are already boosting sales and retention while making an impact. Go to impacthero.com/podcast now to get 10% off. Again, that's impacthero.com/podcast to get 10% off. Welcome to another Climate Tech podcast, interviews with the people trying to save us from ourselves. A self-described corporate hippie, Emma Osborne has found a way to combine her background as a corporate headhunter with her love of animals and nature. As CEO of Citizen Kind, Emma is the first person companies call when they're looking to hire someone in the food tech space, or else who food tech execs reach out to when they're looking to make a change. We talked about her McDonald's moment, what's happening in food tech employment, and some of the cool work she's coordinating to fight lobbyists' disinformation. I reached Emma in London. I'm Ryan Grant Little. Thanks for being here. Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. This is brilliant. Thanks so much.
I think that a lot of people who work in the world of impact probably know you already, whether personally or maybe more likely online. You're the CEO of Citizen Kind, which you describe as a strategic consultancy for impact businesses to help them win the future. What does that mean concretely? What does it mean to win the future?
Win the future. Well, I mean, I feel like we're really in a period of change, great change at the moment. And I think historically, we will probably look back over this 30-year period probably that we're in right now and see it as a revolution beginning of sorts, where I'm really hopeful that a lot of what currently exists in terms of injustice will actually, the balance will shift. And so I came to realize that this was something I wanted to be involved in the setting up of Citizen Kind. And that really was to help companies create a positive impact on the world. So it's definitely a very naive perspective to think that companies could have a positive impact. But I quite like that idea. And I quite like being naive and thinking that you can make money and do good at the same time. And they don't need to be mutually exclusive. You don't need to rely on charities to do all the good work in the world. We actually can use all of our passion and inspiration and motivation to make money as well as helping get things better.
So, a lot of that money can fuel more impact, right? I've run both nonprofits and for-profits, and they both have their pros and cons. But with a for-profit, I mean, the more money that's coming in, the more profitable it is, the more you can scale impact if that's what you choose to do with it, right?
Exactly. We can't leave the money just all in the hands of others and let them do what they want with it. That's not working out so well.
And a lot of the consultancy work that you do is about placing people in roles and at companies. Can you talk about maybe specifically some of the types of services and the consultancy work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So it started off really being a business where we were identifying businesses who needed visionary and value-aligned members of staff to join them, which could bring that secret sauce really into the organization. Because I see it as an untapped resource that lots of startups could benefit from having, but perhaps don't even know that it's available. In my work as a recruiter, I had often interviewed people who told me that their motivation was to do some good. And so knowing that that was in existence, I wanted to help those people then find those opportunities and, of course, help those businesses find those people. So it was a way for me to use my skills and experience and put it to good use, helping others. So having started off like that, it then became quickly obvious that not only did the businesses I was working with need help finding talent, but also actually in their commercial strategy, as well as I've ended up doing all sorts of things like training sales teams and internal investigations and also doing a lot of event creation and curation. So it's been quite a wild ride. So we've ended up becoming more of a fixer type agency. But because we're small, it means that we can be agile. So it's been fun.
And how do you choose the types of organizations you work with? So they need to be an impact organization. Do you have like a set of criteria, or is it something that you kind of just feel and you can tell by interacting with the people and looking at their mission?
Yeah, well, with 20 years experience, I've got pretty good at now identifying who's legit and who's not, or I would like to think so. But also I feel like sometimes actually the opposite can even be useful. So it's great having, very high ideals, but the reality is that obviously when you're in business, you do need to make a profit. But also if you're in the business of change, you cannot just rely on working within your own circle. So I'm a very passionate vegan. And so my instinct is to always want to work with fellow vegans and help support them, because obviously we're only 2% of the population. And in the business world, particularly, that, we're a very small percentage. But if change is going to happen and we're going to get more vegans, then actually vegans need to work with non-vegans. So, my 5-year journey to this point of Citizen Kind has really been kind of coming to that realization and realizing that actually bringing people to vegan values is the thing that needs to happen. But that only can happen if you're working outside and working with people that perhaps even are perceived to be the enemy or the competition. So people like Cargill, for example, they would be an organization I would love to work with, because I see them having a huge opportunity in being able to shift from their current business model to one that is much more fair, equitable, and compassionate.
So the large food processing company, Cargill, and as with a lot of categories of these kind of legacy companies that have historically, emitted a lot of CO2 or, are in industries that we might not, especially from a vegan perspective, be aligned with, to say the least. But because they have this power, if there's an openness to change or to shift, that's where the biggest leverage can happen, right? So as part of it is also, there's a risk always within our sector to preach to the converted or create echo chambers. But it's important to work in these industries, but to find it where the leadership is open to change and not that they're, trying to rely on an organization like you to greenwash or something like that.
Well, that's just it. There's a huge danger of that. And so I guess the trick is to work out where you can have influence and where actually your time is going to be best spent, because that's the other thing. A lot of these really big companies can easily actually tie up businesses in, doing sort of a fool's work to stop them from doing anything impactful in order for them to enable them to their unsustainable business models to continue for just a little bit longer so they can make more money. It's
like catch and kill, but instead of stories, it's with companies.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it all sounds, it does sound very sort of, what's the word? Corrupt, I guess, or maybe maleficent. But I actually believe in the good, that everybody has a good intent and everyone believes that what they're doing is right and doing their best. So it's about, I think, educating people that there's another way and bringing people along that journey of why.
Well, famously, this is why the electric car took so long to come to the market, right? And there's a great documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car about this. And it was basically a catch and kill of technology and of companies early on. So yeah, I think it does happen, and it does make sense for these vested interests sometimes to do this. But as you say, it's about using your experience to find the opportunities where there's companies are looking to change and sincere about it and diving in there. So you've been active in this kind of, especially recruiting work, for 20 years. You've launched Citizen Kind 5 years ago. Before that, and if I remember correctly, your kind of inciting moment for starting Citizen Kind is what you call your McDonald's moment, which I'm guessing is not an I'm loving it type moment.
No,
can you talk a little bit about that? What happened and how that inspired you to change? I work with a lot of companies who plan to open up shop in or expand across Europe. My one big piece of advice: don't fall into the trap of setting up a new entity right away. Instead, talk to my friends at Paracar, who can help you get up and running without all the costs, not to mention the legal and HR hassle. When I was hiring in different EU countries, I wanted my team to focus on their work, not on the country's bureaucracy. After interviewing a half dozen international expansion firms, I chose Paracar because they were by far the most knowledgeable and they're great people. Whether you're a large multinational looking to expand abroad, a small business looking for the right talent, or a contractor, they'll sort it out. Book a free, no-obligation consultation right now at paracar.eu/climate. That's PARAKAR.eu/climate.
Yeah, well, it was related to their advertising, actually, because I was working in a recruitment business that I'd launched in Asia. And I'd been there for 6 years and it had been very successful. And it was a strange dichotomy because the more successful the business became, the more disenfranchised I was and the more disillusioned I became. And it was really because we were helping these companies and these businesses just make more money, but they were chewing up all this brilliant talent that was going, I was supplying them with and then spitting them out. They really didn't care about the people. They really didn't care about the environment. And also I feel like it just felt very transactional. And as I started to really take stock of my role, it was when we were asked to find an account director for the McDonald's account, a creative ad agency, that I thought, is this going to be what I do with my life? That I help McDonald's sell more burgers, more whatever. You know, like
you don't want that on your tombstone?
I can't be a cog in that wheel. So, and I'd already been vegetarian since being a kid, so I don't go to McDonald's. Haven't been to McDonald's for years and years, but it was more that, and I'd actually turned vegan the year before, but it was more just realizing that what I have as a resource is I have my time and I have my money. And if I'm spending my time at work, my work needs to be giving me something back beyond money. So that was really the spark that turned into a gigantic fire. So yes, I then took a year and went around the world and had the absolute best year ever in 2017. It turned into a food research tour, actually, now looking back. But at the time, it was just completely self-indulgent. I've always been a foodie, always loved cooking. So I did cooking classes everywhere I went, looking really to see what inspiration I could get to make delicious vegan food in the future. But increasingly thinking I would have a vegan business at the other end of that year. So a vegan cooking school, maybe, or my own vegan food company. And even before I started Citizen Kind, had a run-in with trying to make vegan ice cream, which was very short-lived, thankfully, as I discovered I don't have a sweet tooth. And wasabi pea ice cream is not something that people needed in their lives in 2018. Maybe now, actually, it would be quite successful. But yes, thankfully, that only lasted 10 days before I realized that my skills and experience were actually already needed by an industry that was burgeoning. So I quickly got stuck in and started to help businesses across all different sectors and industries.
Some weeks I think I might be single-handedly supporting the vegan ice cream industry, at least here in Vienna. You're probably uniquely positioned to talk about the employment market right now for impact companies, and especially probably in the alt protein space and to some extent the climate tech space. A lot of people who listen to the podcast are people who are, just pre or have had that moment of that realization that they want to do something else with their careers, with their lives, and are increasingly looking to get into something that's, fighting the climate emergency. Can you talk a little bit about, we've had lots of commentary about what the funding environment looks like right now in the sector, but I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what the employment market looks like in the sector.
Sure. Well, I think as with any sector that's focused on innovation, there are challenges bringing talent in because you do not have a pool as big as the industry is growing. So it means you have to get creative and look outside and look for complementary skill sets that then can fit into your organization. But I feel like that is harder in this space potentially than in others. And I suppose I'm particularly thinking about something like cultivated meat, where they need people who've got experience culturing stem cells, for example. And actually, a lot of the university programs relatively recently introduced cultivated meat into their academic offering. So it means that the people that you're looking to bring in on the science side, which is largely where most of these companies are, it's R&D focused still, with only a few commercial and very small scale operations happening globally. They're having to look into, particularly into medical fields. Well, when you're looking at impact and talking about doing good in the world, when it comes to curing cancer, that's where a lot of the stem cell scientists sit. So they already feel like they're doing something good in the world. So it means that a lot of the companies that have been set up have actually been held back because they haven't been able to access the talent they've needed as quickly as they've needed it. So that's definitely something that we need to see happening from governments, is actually them investing in creating more talent in in all of these countries that are focusing on alternative protein, and really everybody should be. And then at the same time, obviously, you've got this change within plant-based food, as the meat industry have really got plant-based in its sights with a lot of their narratives. And as that's taken a turn, what that has done to employment is it's meant that there are quite a lot of people now finding themselves out of a job as companies are being consolidated or companies are closing because they now can't get investment, which is a real shame when you look at how much time and how much effort has gone into building this plant-based category, which is so important. And it seems the data is showing that actually this is something that people want. So the timing of it all just seems really unfair, but there's some actual really great talent out there now who have plant-based experience. So for those companies who want to get their hands on them, you're in luck.
I'll put your contact info at the end. I wonder also, so beyond the employment side of things, you're also working on or interested in some campaigns. You've pointed out, you've been a major voice about fighting the disinformation that's out there in the sector as well. I wonder if you want to talk about some of the work that you're doing kind of in this vein and how it's resonating, who it's resonating with, what's basically happening broadly speaking.
Yeah, well, for a start, I think what a lot of people don't realize is how organized the meat and dairy industries are at their communications. So there's a very famous viral campaign called Got Milk, #GotMilk, where you've probably seen celebrities with milk moustaches. And the reason that exists is because the dairy board decided that they were going to use the money garnered from a checkoff program, which was a government mandated program where all dairy companies had to put money into a pot essentially for every gallon of milk they sold. And in order to help get rid of a milk surplus back in the 50s. So this has been going on for decades. But the Got Milk campaign came out of this. And in using celebrities in creating this incredibly sticky image, it's actually, those tactics are now being used on social media. So the meat industry has put $1.5 billion in a meat influencer academy where they spend 8 weeks teaching people how to spread mis and disinformation around meat, how to challenge vegan companies, how to distract and spread misinformation. I mean, spreading misinformation online is like, it feels a very 2023 thing to be doing, but it's not to be underestimated. It has huge power. We've seen that in political circles with Brexit. We saw it with the Trump campaign, where Cambridge Analytica deliberately employed these tactics using bots rather than individuals, but it was still very effective and won both of those campaigns politically. So there's a lot going on almost in the dark that people don't see. And I think we as an industry who are wanting to see a better, fairer, more sustainable food system come to light, we need to now get more organized in terms of how we communicate with the outside world and how we share our mission and vision for the future and get people along for the ride, because I feel like we're really on the right side of history here.
I had Paul Rich from the Pro Veg Incubator on an earlier episode, and we talked about some of the campaigns that they're trying to encourage as well, and wondering, should there be a checkoff program for plant-based, these types of things. But it's crazy to think that this is basically government money, or government mandated money that's going into funding disinformation and fighting these things like labeling laws about plant-based milk and calling these things, passing bills that are saying that it's confusing for people to read oat milk and, be confused that it's not from a cow. And I always point out I've said this before on the podcast, but if this is really such a concern, then why aren't they going after the peanut butter industry, right? Why is that not concerning? It reminds me of, the marriage equality stuff, where it was always like, if you're so concerned about the sanctity of marriage, why aren't you fighting divorce?
Yes, well, exactly. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's all positioning and perspective, right? So I think the peanut butter argument is totally valid. And it's really just showing, though, the power of lobbying governments and the power of industry. I think the whole idea that governments are actually, even responsible for what's going on in their countries from a business perspective is laughable, really, because it's the businesses that are and the industries that are pulling the strings, it seems. It's not the governments making independent decisions, as perhaps they'd like their electorate to believe. Because if it was, these things are farcical, really, the labeling and the fact that that coconut milk has existed as coconut milk for centuries, and yet now we're supposed to call it something else. And you can get, if you really want to pull that argument apart, why are we calling it meat? It should be called flesh. That's what it is. It's flesh. So, these are the things and ideas that we really need to challenge in order to make people realize that, we exist and there's a reason we exist. But I'm afraid they've been very, very effective at getting their processed food message across in the last year, particularly with, there's a book that's come out recently in the UK called Ultra Processed People, which is written by a doctor who's on TV, and so a slight celebrity doctor, if you like. And actually, in amongst the skewering of vegan food, there is some there's some validity in what he's saying. He's pointing at the consumer packaged goods industry and pointing out that we don't need all of these packaged snacks and, artificial flavorings and preservative. Of course, there's a lot of truth in that. But, it's reading between the lines as well. And unfortunately, that narrative has been weaponized heavily against the plant-based industry. So that's something that I'm keen to do something about. And so I'm talking to as many industry bodies as I can, and high net worth individuals, foundations, anyone really that is interested in putting their money and their voice behind a campaign that is going to help turn the tide on some of these things. But the timing is everything. So need to be careful about when we do it.
It does feel like crucial timing right now, as you mentioned, also from the employment side of things, and lots of plant-based companies struggling. But just as countries like South Korea announce like a, massive push towards plant-based and alternative proteins, and this, cultivated meat becoming legal in many countries and jurisdictions at the same time. So a lot of it feels like we just sort of have to hang on during this dip. This is very much like the post.com bubble moment for the internet. And I remember back then people talking about the internet being just a fad, and, that was fun, but that's over now, back to reality. And it's like, no, this is going to underpin everything we do going forward. And I think that same thing is happening with the food system right now.
Absolutely. And I feel like that, if this is the valley of death, okay, fine. But, where we're heading is the upward curve into life. We're sort of helping people to get healthier. We're helping people to live more compassionately. We're helping people get in touch with nature, relate to animals, feel better about their place in the world, and give them the control, perhaps, that maybe people are feeling now they lack in their lives. And so as this impact space grows, whether you're working in food or working in investment or working in media or working in biotech, it's actually feeling like you're being part of something which is exciting and positive is kind of the antidote almost to modern life, I feel. So lots of reasons to be cheerful.
And chipping away at the climate crisis while they're at it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the environmental benefits of a plant-based diet are absolutely extraordinary. And it's proven that it's healthier to choose plant-based alternatives over the flesh and excretion equivalents. I'm deciding I'm going to keep using those terms from now.
Flesh and excretion.
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
Very unpopular pub.
But yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense from a practical perspective. If the environment is something you want to play a part in caring about, then this is something really practical you can do every single day, 3 times a day.
Is there anything that you're working on right now that people can plug into? I mean, you mentioned you're looking for high net worth individuals and foundations to help with things like the disinformation fight and checkoff program type ideas. What else are you working on that people might be able to help with?
Well, actually, I'm excited because this month I'll be launching a campaign alongside Viva, where we are encouraging restaurants and cafes and hotels and anywhere that sells food, basically, to a pledge to become 50% plant-based by end of 2025. So the campaign is 50 by 25. We're going to be launching that to those restaurants this month and then asking the public to support by visiting the restaurants that have signed up for it come February next year. So that'll be, Veganuary will end, and then come February, right, now go out and support your 50 by 25. And then we'll be asking the public to do the same. So it's going to be a very targeted campaign, but something very practical that people can do for our planet. So we're looking to people who currently eat meat, but maybe really care about the environment. This is a way that you can do it slowly and in transition, because I feel like that seems to be the best way for people to get there. It's not necessarily an overnight journey. And most people I know do Veganuary, but then the rest of the year, it's not quite so environmentally friendly. So this is a way to actually help bed in those changes in terms of lifestyle, but do it gradually. And so I feel like it's an easy pledge to make. 50% plant-based by end of 2025, but 2 whole years. That could be, you pick 3.5 days a week. It could be that you choose, I'm going to have all vegan breakfasts and I'm going to have every other day lunch is going to be vegan or dinner's going to be vegan. So there's loads of different ways you could do it. But essentially, it's about just getting people to really think about what they're eating. And of course, for restaurants, it's a way to help them then meet that demand that is going to be coming from consumers. So the 2 things go hand in hand. So really excited about that.
And so to find out about that launch and then to follow along with it, I'm guessing the best place for people to find you is to join your already quite substantial LinkedIn following. I'll put this in the show notes as well, but do you want to just mention what your LinkedIn handle is?
Yeah, sure. It's /Emma Osborne. This sounds really arrogant, but yes, by all means, please find me there and follow me there. But I'm not actually allowed to add any more people as connections because there's a limit of 30,000. So I would love to hear from you. So please send me an email. I know it's really old fashioned, but until LinkedIn changed their ridiculous policy, then I'm stuck.
So they can follow you, but not be a connection with you.
So follow me, send me an email if you'd like to chat. I'd love to hear from you. So it's emma@citizenkind.com. There's no secret about my email address. So yeah, please do get in touch and don't be put off by silly LinkedIn. I mean, Kim Kardashian would last 2 seconds on there. So I don't really understand it, but okay.
Okay, well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Emma. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to finding more about the 50 by 25 campaign from your LinkedIn.
Yes, brilliant. Thanks so much, Ryan. And thanks for this podcast. I really enjoy it. It's fantastic.
That's great to hear. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to another Climate Tech podcast. It would mean a lot if you would subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. Get in touch anytime with tips and guest recommendations at hello@climatetechpod.com. Find me, Ryan Grant Little, on LinkedIn. I'll be back with another episode next week. Bye for now. This episode is supported by Grizzle, B2B content to create and capture demand. I first met Grizzle's founder, Tom Watley, 5 years ago at a conference in Dublin. I was so impressed that I signed a deal with him to do all my software company's content that same evening at the pub. Remember that, Tom?
Kinda.
And they're still doing it 2 years after we sold the company because the new owners love Grizzle as much as I do. If you sell B2B, book 30 minutes in Tom's calendar at grizzle.io/climate. That's GRIZZLE.io/climate.